Hello and welcome. My name is Sahan Shalabi and I'm a Solutions Engineer for Cisco Secure Connect. In this video we're going to be reviewing the Cloud Firewall and implementing some policies. The Cloud-delivered firewall provides us visibility and control over all public and private traffic across all ports and protocols. Included on the Cloud Firewall configuration page we'll see how we'll be able to enable IDS/IPS. And best practices dictate that we should use the Cloud Firewall in order to gain control over our non-web ports. There are two different rule types when it comes to the Cloud Firewall, and which one you use is going to depend on where traffic is destined to. In the case of internet-bound traffic, we would use the internet rule type, and in the case of any traffic destined to internal resources, we would use the private rule type. Please bear in mind, there is a default policy in both rule types. In the case of the default private rule, this is being treated as an implicit deny rule at the moment, and the default internet rule is treated as an implicit allow. The rule structures for both will follow the same format, where you initially give a name and a description to the policy. You then specify the intent of the rule if you want it to either allow or deny traffic to sources and destinations, as well as ports and protocols. There's a section for scheduling and logging if you wanted to either have your rule start or finish at a specific date. And lastly, we'll select whether we want the rule to be enabled or disabled. You might use the disabled option during some form of a migration window where you need to create many rules and have them prepared for a cutover as an example. The IDS/IPS is going to be applied to any internet traffic, so anything going north-south. In terms of the intrusion system modes, you'll be able to select from either detection or prevention. And then the IPS signature lists that we select from will have 4 predefined categories for us to choose from, but we also have the option of creating custom lists, which we'll cover in another video. So let's take a look at some examples. An example of how you might use the internet traffic rule is to block against any potentially dangerous non-web ports. In the example we're going to go through, we're going to be blocking telnet traffic. So let's see what this looks like in the configuration. So I'm currently on the Secure Connect Cloud Firewall page where I can see my default rules in place. I want to create a new internet traffic rule to start to block traffic to telnet. I have the option of adding a description here as well if I wanted to. I'll move on to the next section for the rule intent, where in this case I want to deny this traffic. Under the protocol, we want to block TCP/23, so I'm going to select TCP for the time being. I'm not too fussed on where the traffic is sourced from or where it's going, since I want to block all telnet traffic. I'll simply specify the ports in the destination as 23. The rule scheduling and logging, I want this rule to be applied immediately and never end. I also want logging to be enabled so that if anybody does attempt to try to open a port on telnet, that it's going to hit our reporting, and I'll leave the hit count interval as 24 hours as well. I want this rule to be applied immediately, so I'll leave it as enabled, and I'll simply save the rule. And then after a minute or so, once it's had a chance to have this rule propagate throughout the cloud infrastructure, we'll start to see telnet traffic being blocked. For a private application network rule, a couple of examples we might look to implement is permitting branch-to-branch connectivity. In addition, we may also need to provide access to our private apps and resources for our remote access VPN users. So let's see how we would do this in the configuration. So to get started, I'm going to take a look and see which one of my sites have been onboarded to Secure Connect. I have my London branch that's currently connected at the moment and my San Francisco branch. For the London branch, we're advertising the .20 address range, and the MX's IP address for this subnet is on .1. And then for the San Francisco location over here, I've got the .32 network, and once again, the MX's IP address on here is .1. I'm going to go over to the appliance status page of this San Francisco location, and then to the Tools tab. And I'll start by trying to ping the MX's IP address for the subnet behind the London branch, and as expected we can see that this is currently failing. So in order to get bidirectional communication, I'm going to add a new rule and select from the private application and network rule. I'll create a rule to allow San Francisco to London. For the rule intent, I'll specify allow. For the sources, I'll include the subnet ranges for both of these sites. And then I'll skim through the rule schedule logging and status. And then we'll give it about a minute or so for this rule to propagate, and then we should start to see pings recover. So it looks like the rule has had a chance to propagate, and we are starting to see ping messages go through. I'll just run that one more time to make sure that the loss rate is 0, and it is. So we have bidirectional communication between these two sites now. Now, for the rule to allow our remote access VPN users to access some of our internal applications, I'll go ahead and create another private application rule. For this, I'll do allow Sahand to our Firepower management console. For the rule intent, I'll specify allow. And then for the sources, for the users connecting to the VPN as a service, we challenge them for SAML authentication. So you can select the user identity as the source for this rule. You can select from private applications if you have specified them, but don't worry if you haven't already. The scope for that is going to be covered in another video. For the time being, I'll just type in the IP address of where our FMC is reachable from, and then go next, and finally save and add the rule. Now the rule has been created, I'll go ahead and try to browse to the Firepower management console and the IP address it's reachable on. And fantastic, we can see that's loaded and my user account is now able to access this internal resource. Last but not least, we have our cloud IDS IPS settings. For our example, we may want to protect our users against malicious threats. This is going to put the IDS IPS into protection modes, and this mode is only available with the Advantage licensing tier of Secure Connect. We may want the approach to be security driven while avoiding false positives or any performance degradation. So let's see how we would configure this. At the top of the Cloud Firewall page, we'll see the Cloud IPS settings. If I expand this option, I'll see the Configure IPS settings button. From the intrusion system modes, I want to select protection in my example. And then from the IPS signature lists, we have a few presets. If we go ahead and expand each one of these, we'll see that there's a description to see what the outcome is from these IPS signature lists. In my use case, I did want something security driven, but I wanted to avoid anything like false positives or any increased network latency. So in my example, I'm going to choose the balanced security over connectivity option and then simply hit save. Once done, the IPS will now be running and protecting your users from any malicious threats. That's all for this video. Thank you very much for joining and all the best. Take care.